This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and today we're going to do a comparison smackdown between two high-end Android tablets, the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 that came out very recently, and the Motorola Xoom. We happen to have the Xoom with Verizon 3G, someday hopefully 4G, but you can also get this for with Wi-Fi only. They both run Android 3.1, which is a tablet optimized operating system. They both have NVIDIA Tegra 2 dual-core processors running at 1 GHz, 1280 by 800 resolution, Wi-Fi 802.11 BGN, both of them are dual band. They both have Bluetooth, they both have a GPS. They're pretty much identical in terms of specs, which is the conundrum with all these Android 3.1 tablets. They really have pretty much the same specs, so what you're buying on is a couple of features here and there that are present or are not, and on the look and feel of the tablet, and of course also price. And if you have brand preference. Now both Motorola and Samsung obviously are tier 1 brands, and the price is the same too. If you get the 32 gig with Wi-Fi, both of these are $599. Samsung also offers the 16 gig for $499 for those of you who are budget conscious. But keep in mind with the Samsung you cannot expand the storage afterwards. We'll get into that later. Motorola Xoom is also available, as we mentioned, with Verizon Wireless inside, so those of you who need to use this wide area, need to use it everywhere, so you want to use the GPS while you're driving, clearly for now the Xoom is going to be the better pick. Now I'm sure we'll see Galaxy Tabs available on other carriers in the future, but for right now it's a Wi-Fi only device. Okay, first look and feel. I think everybody's going to agree that the Galaxy Tab 10.1 is the winner on looks. It's absolutely gorgeous, it's incredibly thin. It has a plastic back. It's available with either gray or white plastic back. And in fact, it looks so much like the iPad from the front, it's almost hard to tell them apart unless, you notice the aspect ratio is a bit different. This guy's longer this way. So a very good looking tablet. The Motorola Xoom I would also call good looking, but in a different way. It's good looking in the way that the Motorola Droid phone and Droid X and X2 are. It's got that kind of rugged, more manly look to it. It's built like a tank, liberal use of metal, and it's got a soft touch finish that feels very nice in hand. Which leads to my point about durability. This guy here, I don't worry about at all. I think if I turn around and accidentally bumped into a wall, it would dent the wall instead. It's very, very sturdy tablet. Whereas this just feels and looks quite delicate. Of course, there's a lot more plastic here, and that's how Samsung gets it so lightweight, but this one probably takes a whole lot more gentleness and care. Second most important feature probably for most people is the display quality, and the Motorola Xoom is just average. It's perfectly sharp and it's great for text, but as you can see just in the difference here, there's less color saturation and less brightness on the Xoom, whereas the Samsung has a stunning display. It's right up there at the E-Transformers IPS display. Colors really pop, very saturated, and it's a very bright display. It's a little bit better for outdoor use, therefore, though both of these are high glare and not ideal in that respect for outdoor use, but the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 can certainly fight bright ambient light more successfully. In terms of software, we're looking at the same operating system, again Android OS 3.1 Honeycomb, and both of these are fairly vanilla Android. The Motorola Xoom is the most vanilla. They do not add any driver or extra software that Google has not released themselves, and hence this has become the equivalent of the Nexus phones for Google, which means it gets updates first. So if you're an early adopter type and you want the latest, greatest, you want to be the first to get Google Movies, Google Music Beta, operating system updates, the Motorola Xoom is it. The drawback is that Motorola doesn't write any custom drivers to make up for deficiencies. For example, we know a couple of tablets have their own SD card slot drivers and USB host drivers, whereas Motorola for the United States Xooms is waiting and letting Google do that stuff. In terms of expandability, speaking of things like ports and slots, the Galaxy Tab is the clear loser among Android tablets. It does not have a built-in USB host port. It has a proprietary port only at the bottom. It does not have an HDMI out port, and it has no micro SD card slot. So my suggestion is if you think you're going to want to put a bunch of stuff on it, you're definitely going to want to get the most internal storage, the 32 gig version, because you can't use a micro SD card slot or a USB based expansion solution very easily. So the Motorola has that micro SD card slot. It has a dedicated HDMI port, it's a micro HDMI port, works fine with TVs, and it has USB host capability, and Motorola has just released a cable for that. However, because they're working with Google for drivers and support, right now it's really basically supporting PictBridge and not USB mass storage mode. With the Samsung, they just announced some accessories, so they're going a bit down the Apple route, and that's maybe not so attractive an idea because, well, you got to offer more than the iPad if you want to fight with it. You can get HDMI out, you're going to have to buy a dongle that Samsung makes. You can get USB out, you're going to have to buy another dongle. That raises the total cost of investment of this device here, and you've been carrying more stuff that's easy to lose, adds weight, though not so much weight, these kinds of adapters, but still, that means this guy may be the somewhat more expensive solution in the end if you want those features. And while we're talking about accessories, both these companies offer external Bluetooth keyboards, cases, docks, that kind of thing. I would say Motorola has the edge. Right now you can see a lot of the accessories in store if you want to visit your local Best Buy or other electronics store that carries it, but the accessories are really gorgeous looking and well made themselves. For example, here's Motorola's keyboard. It's a Bluetooth keyboard, it's good size. It's really nicely made, it's wonderful to type on. Well made, looks good. And this also works with the Atrix, by the way. But I would say in terms of accessories, when you buy an accessory, it's kind of gratifying when it itself is a nice looking piece of hardware for the price, and for the same price, the Samsung keyboard I've seen so far for the Galaxy Tab is not as nice as this. And while we're talking about things like USB and micro SD card slots, those are also handy because they are ways that you can get stuff onto your device or off of your device. Now again, it's still not quite a great comparison because Motorola still hasn't released the driver for the micro SD card slot here, though there are alternatives for those of you who like to visit places like XDA developers if you want to get a driver now. But in general, this, you just mount it and it mounts as a USB mass storage device, the Motorola Xoom, and with the Mac you need Google's free Android file transfer for Honeycomb tablets. That's true of all Honeycomb tablets. But once you install that, it's pretty turnkey. You plug in your tablet, it shows up like a drive, and you can copy files to and from that very easily. With Samsung, they have the horror that is keys, Samsung keys. I don't know why they're using that in a tablet. They use that in their feature phones first, then it started to rear its ugly head in some of their Android smartphones. And basically it's something more like MTP protocol, and that means Windows only at first. They just released a Mac beta driver, beta. And this little guy doesn't just mount like a mass storage device. You can use the Samsung Keys driver, or you can let Windows go to default with the MTP driver, and it acts like an MP3 player basically. Now, so for something that's a full-featured tablet that can perhaps combat netbooks for functionality, you really just want to be able to get stuff on and off. You're not transferring just music to this or movies. So this is a lot more cranky to deal with in terms of USB file transfer. In terms of speed, both these guys are running the same CPU with the same amount of RAM. For some reason, the Motorola Xoom, both testing under the same 3.1 OS, scores almost 500 points higher on Quadrant. Unusual, given the fact that they're running pretty much the same hardware, and more unusual given the fact that they both feel equally as responsive. You open up the apps here, you open up the apps here, it's just as responsive. You launch an application, we'll pick the same one. Flickster Movies on both. And you can see you're getting about the same performance. We can run the same 1080p video on both of these guys, and you'll see they both handle it equally as well. Now we're going to play the same 1080p MPEG-4 video trailer on both of these guys, and you can see performance is the same on both of these. And they both do quite a good job, by the way, playing 1080p MPEG-4 video. And you can also hear the speakers on each. I'd say these two have the best speakers among Android Honeycomb tablets on the market currently. I might give an edge to the Samsungs. I think they're a little bit louder, but the Motorola's are also very high quality. They fire out the back, so that can affect your perception of volume. And now we're testing an Adobe Flash 10.3 playback on both of these. We're on the full YouTube site playing the X-Men trailer. And again, the performance is side-by-side equal. We'll go to full screen on both.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any
And we're seeing pretty much identical performance.
as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
So on the technicality of benchmark scores, the Motorola Xoom wins, but experientially, again, I'm not really seeing any difference in terms of behavior. Likewise with 3D games, they both are quite capable. And our last points to visit would be battery life. Both of these have similar battery life. The Samsung is a little bit more stymied by video playback. We find that the Xoom will last a bit longer if you're playing movies, but in everyday use, not involving video playback, the Samsung lasts a little longer, so we're pretty much on par there. One's a little bit better for video playback, the Xoom. This one's better for everyday, other kind of use. Both of them not quite as long as the iPad, but you'll definitely get, say, 7 hours, 8 hours out of these guys without a problem. of everyday normal use. And lastly, the cameras. The Motorola and this Samsung Galaxy Tab have 2 megapixel front-facing video chat cameras that work with Google Talk for video chatting. Samsung has a 3 megapixel rear camera with a small LED flash on the back. And the Motorola Xoom has a 5 megapixel camera with a dual LED flash. Motorola Xoom wins on that count. And while megapixels don't always count for everything, I would say that the Xoom does in fact take better pictures. The Samsung does surprisingly well for 3 megapixels, which is very low. But the Motorola does take better still shots and sharper video. So that's a comparison of 2 top tablets, the Motorola Xoom here on the right and the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1. Both are $599 with Wi-Fi and 32 gigs of storage. And it's a pretty close race, and given the points that we've covered, think about which points are most important to you. Do you care most about display or expandability, weight, looks, those kinds of things? Personally, I've had the Xoom since the day it came out, and it's my pick because I do prefer the greater expandability and the ruggedness of it, but I can certainly understand anybody who prefers lightweight and the much more colorful and bright display that the Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 has. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is our Samsung Galaxy Tab 10.1 versus Motorola Xoom Smackdown.